In this town, there's no off-season. The news never stops, and neither do we. It's always game day in Cleveland with Andy Baskin and Daryl Ryder.
It's always game day in Cleveland. He's Daryl Ryder. I'm Andy Baskin. We are brought to you by Smiley One and Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling solution. Daryl, all kinds of stuff kind of floating around. We're still waiting on quarterback, a lot of rumors and things popping around. I was going to start with Stadium. I am going to start. What's the latest on this Carson Wentz thing? I mean, I don't know that I'm going to be honest. I mean, we've talked about almost every free agent that's out there and the fact that, and I give Mary Kay Cabot credit for talking about it, but I just don't think it's as big. And why did it pick up as huge news this time when like a lot of people have been talking about this for a while? And maybe it's just on the gist that her story was based on the fact that if the Browns can't get Russell Wilson, they can get Carson Wentz. Like, in what world does that sound like that's a good idea based on that theory?
Well, I mean, there's just nothing going on right now. That's why it's news.
Okay.
I mean, it's not been an exciting offseason by any stretch, to nobody's surprise. Well, at least not to my surprise. There's just not a lot of money for the Browns to spend. There's not a lot of worthy free agents to spend that money on. So, the fact that they're I'm interested in a lot of stuff and none of it's news. So,
you're not interested in being a billionaire?
Now, I'm very interested.
Billionaire, so you could buy the Celtics.
I'm very interested in being a billionaire. It's a good time in this country to be a billionaire.
I guess
you don't have to pay taxes. Everything you get all the tax breaks, and all the poor people pay for all your stuff. It's great. But yeah,
it's always game day in politics, by the way. I want to make sure you know that. Okay.
Just having a little fun.
Oh, I'm chuckling on the inside.
But I mean, they're just the quarterback options this offseason are all terrible. Both in the draft as well as in free agency. And maybe Carson Wentz is the plan B if they can't get Russell Wilson. Maybe Russell's plan A. I mean, okay, great, fantastic. It's just, I'm not real optimistic about anything the Browns really are going to do in the upcoming season anyway. I think that they're maybe a 6-win football team, unless whatever quarterback they put on the field just has a great year out of nowhere, then yeah, maybe they have a chance to, surprise people. But I mean, the Browns are not a contender this year. And they're really not going to be a contender until they find a quarterback that can play on the level of, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, even Justin Herbert at this point. And, that guy's not available in free agency. You've got a bunch of retreads and washed up guys that are available right now. That's why I call it dumpster diving for quarterbacks, because that's exactly what they're doing. And Andrew Berry's not in a hurry right now. We're recording this on March 20th. He's not in a hurry to make a move. And that's okay. The Browns don't play a game for, a long time here, but at some point they got to find the best of the worst and get them in here. And kind of get this thing rolling in the right direction, or else, we're going to be sitting here when the offseason program starts in April without a quarterback, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think they'll have a decision well in advance of that.
All right, so you think all these things. So what do you actually? Can you tell me what you think the game plan is? I mean, because another thing we've heard is, hey, Mary Kay was talking about this. I even said this initially. Maybe you draft 2 quarterbacks if you don't think so. If you want to draft them later, or maybe if you just don't think, maybe you draft Shedeur Sanders because you think that's the right thing to do it too, and you don't want to miss the opportunity if he's going to be something great. But then maybe you draft another one of your quarterback in the first 4 rounds. You're right. It's just that there's no sustenance to this whole thing.
Well, I have also said for weeks that they could draft 2 quarterbacks. Look, this is throw anything against the wall and pray something sticks. That's where the Browns are at. Even if whether it's Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or Milroe or whoever, right? You are throwing stuff against the wall, hoping something sticks. That's where the Browns are at. And that is just an absolute god-awful place to be as a franchise when you're basing things on hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody cross our fingers and hope it works out. When that is the basis of what you're doing, and that's exactly the basis of what Andrew Berry's doing right now, you're doomed for failure, right? I mean, just bad things are going to happen. So, I don't really have any hot takes. I'm really not upset by it. I'm really not emotionally invested by it. Just like they're going to do whatever they're going to do. Sit back and, watch this disaster unfold. Can't wait. It's going to be great.
I mean, are we really walking into a season believing this is? How do you sell to a fan base that you're walking into a season that you're hoping for 7 wins?
Yeah.
How do you sell that and then raise ticket prices on top of that?
You bring in Journey to perform on draft night.
How much was it worth it for a concert ticket?
I mean, yeah. I'm just telling you. Like you create an influencer committee, social media influencers to say lots of nice stuff about you because the media is probably not going to say a lot of nice stuff about you. Like, this is what losing franchises do. They do stuff like that. They do gimmicks. And that's where the Browns are at. They have to do gimmicks to keep their fans engaged because winning is not going to be, not going to do it for them, right? I mean, they're not going to win a lot this year. And again, it's going to take a little bit of a miracle, a little bit of, something unexpected. I think the Browns know exactly what they face in 2025. And again, that's why they're doing the draft party with Journey and, they're doing the influencer committee thing and trying to get people to do and say and post great stuff about them on social media and things like that. I mean, they're trying to get a stadium built. When you can't focus on the product on the field, Andy, you do all the ancillary stuff. And if you look at and I'm not criticizing the Browns, but like you look at what the Browns are doing right now, and it's all based on ancillary stuff. You know what I mean? The product does not sell itself, so they have to try and sell the product.
Who's driving that though? Is that front office? Is that business office? Who drives that theory? Like, I got to believe that if you're in football operations, you walk in there every day believing, hey, we're going to do the best we possibly can to try to put a team together that can make the playoffs and make it to the Super Bowl. I can't imagine that there isn't anybody that works in football ops that goes to work and doesn't believe that every day.
Well, I mean, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry believe they're making the playoffs this year.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But you also need to be realistic about where you're at. You got to be honest about where you're at, right? I mean, look,
I got to be honest. If I'm Kevin Stefanski, I can't look at it that way. I got to believe that no matter what you give me, I'm going to get the best out of these guys, and we're going to try to make the play. Because his job, I mean, everybody knows their job is on the line. Because if they walk into the season and even any front office will be like, oh, you're safe no matter what. And then you walk out of it with a 1 or 2 or another 3-win season, you're looking for another job. And unless that's what you want.
Again, I think you can divide the front-facing, hey, we're competing to win and we're playing to win, but also to have, behind closed doors, have a very private and honest assessment of where you are as an organization. Like, because you can't take appropriate steps forward, Andy, if you can't honestly look yourself in the mirror. And
I just think if you're a head coach and you believe you can't win, that your locker room will eat you alive.
Right.
And those guys want to win.
100%. And so that's why, like, yeah, you have those conversations very privately between you and Andrew Berry. Like, hey, we're deficient here. We're deficient there. Obviously, we're going to be deficient everywhere until we find a quarterback, right? Okay. Well, the options are terrible this offseason. And so I don't know, who do we pick between bad option and terrible option, right?
Bad. I go bad.
But you see what I'm saying? Like,
no, I know exactly what you're saying,
Daryl. The team, we have to compete. So let's find the best possible option that's out there, even though there are no good options. And then, fingers crossed, they're able to come in here and do something great. And look, if they draft Shedeur Sanders, there's nothing to say that kid can't come in here and be a franchise changer. I don't believe he is, but in my opinion, no matter. If the Browns love Cam Ward and they think he's the franchise changer, you got to go get him, right? But if you don't, then you stay where you're at. If you don't believe Shedeur Sanders is the guy, well, then you sucker somebody into trading for the second pick to get Shedeur. You see what I'm saying? Like,
no, I get it. I
it's all about what their honest evaluations, which, by the way, they don't share publicly. You know, they're not going to tell people what they honestly think about folks. But if they're privately honest about the current state of affairs and how they've evaluated things, I think they'll be fine. You know, you get through this year, you set yourself up so maybe in 2026 you can turn the corner again and bounce back, right? That'd be this
Right.
second year of your rookie quarterback in a system, and more comfortable, all the cliche narratives that get thrown out there with young quarterbacks, right?
Mhm.
But the standard, the problem for the Browns, Andy, and this is what this whole thing boils down to, is the standard. And the standard is Jaden Daniels turned around the Washington Commanders in 1 year. You had Josh Allen turn around the Buffalo Bills. Joe Burrow turned around the Cincinnati Bengals. Patrick Mahomes turned around the Kansas City Chiefs. Lamar Jackson, well, I don't know necessarily he turned around the Ravens because the Ravens have historically been pretty good, but he elevated them, right? He made them contenders in the division and in the conference. So, like, that's the standard. Justin Herbert with Jim Harbaugh. Now all of a sudden the Chargers are a respectable, relevant team out west. So, like, that's the standard that the Browns are having to deal with, right? In trying to find their next quarterback. Who can they find to meet that standard that can allow them to play up to that standard? And I'm here to tell you right now, I don't personally believe that player exists this offseason. But it's Andrew Berry's job and it's Kevin Stefanski's job to identify and go get said players to help them at least come close to that for 2025.
He's Daryl Ryder. I'm Andy Baskin. Let's talk about what's going on with the Dome. We'll do that next. Plus, I have one more quarterback I want to throw at you. It's always game day in Cleveland. It's always game day in Cleveland. He's Daryl Ryder. I'm Andy Baskin. We are brought to you by Smiley One and Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling solution. Daryl, what is the latest in the war between the city of Cleveland and the Cleveland Browns? Because this thing got real ugly this week, I think, between, pointing fingers and, there were some pretty harsh words that were used by the city of Cleveland, not so much by the Browns, but the Browns want to move forward with the Dome, and the city of Cleveland is, I'm not sure, let's do it. Let's go. You know what? You are right, Mayor Bibb, 100% everything you're saying. All right, come up with the money you said that you wanted to give us. Let's see it right now. What would happen if that happened?
Yeah, I think that the relationship between the Browns and the city of Cleveland is dead.
Well, it's obvious in the rhetoric that's going on right now,
yeah,
too. What was the word the Browns used? Extort?
Yeah, well, I used that word months ago.
Yeah.
The
city, can you just re-up that? Because I want to make sure I'm right on that. The city is saying the Browns are trying to extort taxpayer dollars. Is that the right word? I want to make sure I'm 100% right. I don't know why.
Well, the Mayor Bibb called it the Haslams scheme.
Scheme. That's what it's scheme. Sorry, I don't want to be wrong. Scheme.
And then the Browns came back with extort.
Okay.
Look, I think the Browns feel like that Mayor Bibb has failed to negotiate with them in good faith. And based on the refiling that the Browns did this week in U.S. District Court, they outline why, without using those words. That's when I say negotiate in bad faith, those are my words. That's how I describe the situation. But they basically outline that in their filing. They outline all the details in the existing lease and how the Browns have complied with that lease. They detail how the previous administration, Frank Jackson, encouraged them to spend millions upon millions of dollars to study lakefront development and come up with a master plan. Mayor Bibb did nothing with it and then spent millions of taxpayer dollars to come up with his own plan. And then, there's the part where the Browns tried to poke holes in the city's financing proposal for a stadium renovation. You go back to August when Bibb put out his plan that, included existing tax streams related to the stadium. It included using the City Hall garage and the Muni lot on event days using that revenue to pay for the stadium renovations. And then it was over 30 years. The mayor's like, we want another 30-year lease. And the Browns are saying, well, there's not 30 years of life left in that building.
Right.
There might be 20 years of life in the building, but there's certainly not 30. And then on top of it, it's going to require hundreds of millions of dollars. I've been told the figure is $700 million in needed money to maintain the building after the renovation over that 20-year period. So you're talking about $1.7 billion that's going to be needed over the next 20 years for that building.
So it seems to me that Mayor Bibb is prepared to spend $1.7 billion then, right?
Well, see, I don't think he is, though.
Well, then why is he saying what he's saying? That's my question.
Because what he's doing is he wants the Browns, because the whole thing with the Modell law is one of two things. One, you got to get permission to move. And two, you got to give the chance to sell the team over a 6-month period, right?
Right.
Well, Haslams aren't selling the team. So what's left? Get permission. Well, the only way the Cleveland Browns are getting permission from the city of Cleveland to build in Brook Park is if they write a big fat check to the city of Cleveland. That's how this is going to go down, okay? And from Bibb's standpoint, he's saying, look, see, I'm fighting for the taxpayer. I am going to steal money from the Cleveland Browns to get permission to leave, okay? And that's going to help pay back some of the money we spent on the stadium, and it's going to allow for us to pay for the loss of whatever income taxes we would have had and things like that, right?
From the street vendors?
I guess.
That loss of income?
Well, player taxes and things like that, because the job tax and things like that. So, I mean, there is legitimate revenue that would be lost if the Browns left the city of Cleveland. But privately...
Does that outweigh what the city's paying?
Well, that's the thing. Privately, the city bemoans how the Browns are a lost leader for them because of police overtime and safety services and all the resources required, to put on NFL games. So privately, they bemoan that the Browns lose them money while publicly crying how the loss of the Browns is going to be this economic disaster for the city of Cleveland. So they're telling two different stories here. And then, another tentacle to this is there is no economic driver around the Browns. There's no development around the stadium. And you can draw all the pretty pictures you want. But if you're the Cleveland Browns right now, Andy, there's no plan been put in place. So let's say the renovation went forward. Do you really want your fans coming down to your stadium, which, by the way, is already hard enough to get to?
Right.
The next 10 years being a part of a construction project around it? Right? Because that's what would happen. There's no plan to begin construction on the lakefront by the city right now. There's no plan to fund it. We don't know if the federal money that got appropriated, that $130 million that Downtown Cleveland Incorporated, Michael Deemer, really patted themselves on the back for earlier this week in those blistering statements directed at the Haslams and the Browns. The Trump administration's reevaluating the distribution of previously allocated federal money. So there's no guarantee Cleveland's getting that $130 million for the lakefront right now. So, and the Browns are arguing there's no concrete payment plan outlined by the city, both for stadium renovation as well as the connecting to downtown and the development around the stadium. They're like, in layman's terms, they have painted with a broad brush a vision, but they've provided us no details. Meanwhile, we've provided them with all kinds of details. And they're trying to hold this Modell law over our heads and act like we're trying to do what Art Modell did, which was take the team out of the state of Ohio, out of Cleveland, out of the state of Ohio, and elsewhere, which is not what we're doing. We're literally going less than a mile outside the city limits, staying in Northeast Ohio, still going to be the Cleveland Browns. We as an organization believe that the dome is investing in a dome is a lot better than investing in repairing an open air stadium, because we can attract events with a dome that we can't with an open air stadium. And the pushback from the politicians are the cost to do that is just too much.
So let me ask you this, because, and you brought this up on a radio show today. I'm not trying to start anything here, but are the politicians trying to protect Dan Gilbert? And this is why I say that. He's got all kinds of renovations going on in the land that is zoned for casino, that is now going to be that new International Center for Health Rehabilitation, like the greatest sports facility on the face of this earth, which I think is outstanding, by the way. I'm not questioning that. but there's also question marks about future concerts and things that might have gone into Rocket Arena that would now move out to the airport into the new dome. So I'm asking you, do you think, and we all know it's not too hard to look up, the Haslams give money to politicians. I'm sure the Gilberts give money to politicians. Is there a block here because of the two major sports owners in town? And is this an ego trip between the two of those guys? I'm asking you because I think you may know, but if you don't, feel free to say I don't know.
Well, I think what's going on, the business community has lined up behind Mayor Bibb and County Executive Chris Ronayne in opposing the dome. And I think the greatest opposition to the dome centers around what you're bringing up, and that's downtown development.
Sure.
Bedrock, which is owned by Dan Gilbert, is putting in $3.5 billion into the riverfront to basically rebuild that whole area. Okay.
Right. Land that is zoned for casino. Let's get
part
that straight.
Part of the land is.
Because the temporary casino was supposed to be temporary. Now it is the permanent casino.
Right. So
which Bedrock and Dan Gilbert they sold off too.
So what's happening is there is a market stress that can happen. And I think and Ronayne is on record as talking about this, the cannibalization of downtown to do Brook Park. They don't believe both can work. They believe that if the Browns build Brook Park, it is going to have negative effects on the growth of downtown Cleveland.
I agree with that. I can agree with that.
Whether that's Dan Gilbert's Bedrock's project on the riverfront, whether that's the reimagining of the lakefront without the Browns being there, whether it's expansion of Playhouse Square, the warehouse district, right? So, and here's the other problem that you have, and we talked about this too on the radio, is all these developers today are building $500,000 housing units. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Haslams are not going to do the same thing in Brook Park. Bedrock's doing the same thing. The lakefront would be the same thing. The home builders in Northeast Ohio, you go on, if you're looking to buy a new construction home, guess what? Starting price tags, $400,000 to $500,000. Mm-hmm. Now I actually, for fun the other day, I looked, it's now up to close to $600,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the problem. And if you want to fix a housing crisis, yes, we need more housing, but stop building rich people homes. You've got to build homes that people can afford, the 150 to 250,000 type homes. That's what needs built in this region. But you have all these developers that are seeing these big dollar signs. And so they're aiming for the $500,000 and up homes.
All right, Daryl, hang on a second. Hold on to that thought for a second. Let's bring that up. We'll come back. We'll keep talking about that. It's always game day in Cleveland. It's always game day in Cleveland. We continue our conversation about the Browns as we do each and every show. He's Daryl Ryder. I'm Andy Baskin. Thanks for listening on the Odyssey app and, of course, watching us on YouTube. Daryl, we were talking, by the way, we're brought to you by Smiley One and Bryant, Northeast Ohio's premier heating and cooling solution. Daryl, we were talking about the dome and we were talking about what part of the missing element is to some of this. Because we were talking about, is this an ego thing now? Is this politicians trying to get a bigger name so they can say, I saved football in Cleveland, or I was smart enough to do this or do that? I do like the fact that Brook Park has been very kind of quiet about everything.
Well, Brook Park doesn't want to do anything to jeopardize, this project for themselves, right?
Sure.
Because they certainly have a lot to gain in real estate values since this project has, surfaced in the public domain. Those property values have gone up all of a sudden. Land in Brook Park is worth more. So now I do think that it's a fine line between the politicians looking out for the quote unquote taxpayer and also to, saber rattling. It's a lot of money when you're talking about $1.2 billion in public money going toward a project, whether that's through a tax increment financing plan, whether that's through, what the Browns have proposed, that plus, the taxes that are generated, sales, income, parking, all that kind of stuff that are generated by the complex. That's what's actually used to fund the public portion of the complex. There is a bed tax increase for out-of-town visitors. They would pay that, not the local people here. unless of course you're doing a, like a staycation or something like that.
Mhm.
But
Well, they could do it where you don't. I mean, all you have to do is show your driver's license.
right. The state and the governor has his plan for the state contribution. But it's a lot of money. And so, Ronane's looking at it like, okay, you're asking us as a county to put up $600 million. And the reason
Do they have it? Let me start there. Does the county have that money?
No, well, it's done in bonds.
Okay.
You have to finance the bonds. And the reason why it's $600 million for the county is because, Brook Park can't get the same bond rating that Cuyahoga County can, which means Brook Park's interest rate would be higher.
Right.
But if the county can backstop Brook Park's bonds, now all of a sudden Brook Park can get a better interest rate on their bonds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. Yep.
And that's
like
why,
having a cosigner.
right. And that's why Ronane right now is losing his collective mind, because he's doing the county jail. He's got other county projects that he's working on. And he's like, yeah, we don't have $600 million to potentially throw at a Browns dome. We maybe could scrape up $300 million for a stadium renovation, but it wouldn't even be that, because some of that's coming out of, Cleveland's pocket too. And it's, significantly more money if the Brook Park thing happens. And there is legitimate concern amongst the business community that if a development is built in Brook Park, that it's going to cannibalize the downtown. It's going to take away from other developments around the county, and that this market can't sustain that level of growth. You know what I'm saying? And so like, I get both sides of the argument. The Browns, they want it because they look at that development aspect, which they're willing to pay for and privately finance through their business partners that they have collaborated with. They're looking at it as revenue streams. They're trying to find ways to make additional revenue streams outside of Browns games in the NFL, and that's through parking revenue. Guess what? There's not 20,000 parking spaces downtown for the Cleveland Browns to receive revenue from. And the mayor's proposal of taking two locations, the Muni Lot and the Willard Garage, those spaces, and I don't know how many spaces those are, okay? I'm not going to speculate. But that money, though, is not going to the Cleveland Browns and into their pockets. That's going toward the Browns stadium. You see what I'm saying? And so the Browns are looking at the lakefront, a couple of views. One, can't get to it. It's a pain in the ass, right? I think we'd all agree with that. Two, stadium's poorly designed, was obsolete the day it opened. It's going to cost $1 billion to fix it. And we're still going to have the same problems we have now. People can't get in and out of the damn thing, okay? Three, you can't get to the stadium easily from downtown. There's no connector. And the one bridge that connected downtown to the stadium, well, that's been closed the last couple of years for, I don't know, safety reasons. That orange bridge that went over the railroad.
Yeah, the one that had the helmet or the field goal post.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it, right? Also, no economic development around the stadium. Also, Cleveland Browns not controlling the economic development around the stadium. Cleveland Browns not controlling parking. Well, where can they do all that stuff? And where can they attract even more events? Brook Park with a dome, right? So it's easy to see why the Browns want to do this project. It's also easy to see why the politicians and the business community don't want the Browns to do.
I get all that. So, Daryl, let me throw this question at you. And so, of right now, of what you know and what we've kind of read along the way, how much of the project is Haslam funded? How much of it is public funded?
50-50. Both proposals are 50-50.
Okay,
but
and then of the 50, oh, go ahead, sir. Sure.
If you include, though, that's stadium, okay?
Okay.
If you want to include the development aspect in Brook Park, it's more like 65-35 private versus public. Does that make sense?
Because I'm going to break this down. I want to take this at a different angle, okay? So let's just say of the 50% that's being paid by the taxpayers, how much of that is from the state?
Well, right now, it'd probably be 25% of the total cost would come from the state, 25% would come from county/city, and then 50% from the Cleveland Browns.
Is the state committed no matter what the county and city do?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Okay, so now you're up to 75%, right?
What do you mean?
If you discount the county and the city, right?
Yeah.
So what's to stop the Haslams from just going out and trying to find investors for the other 25% and saying, forget it, we don't want to do it that way? Well,
how it's been explained to me is that the the Browns are very dug in on the division of the pie from a numbers and economic standpoint. Okay. If they pick up a greater portion of the tab, then I think, ticket prices will really super skyrocket because they're not investing their money out of the kindness of their heart. They are running a business. The Cleveland Browns are a multi-billion-dollar business, right? Same thing with the Cleveland Guardians. Same thing with the Cavaliers, right? You're running a business here. What's going to be interesting, Andy, is the what the financing might look like is not going to be clarified for at least another 2 months. And the reason I say that is because this proposal by the governor actually opens some doors for the Browns. It's a statewide proposal to help not just the Browns, but help all the pro and minor league sports teams in town with stadium projects by creating this, what I dub it a stadium slush fund, stadium construction slush fund. That, because the Bengals are they want to do a $1.2 billion renovation to their stadium.
Right.
The Cincinnati Reds want to do a renovation to Great American Ballpark. Okay. Well, the Guardians already dipped into the general fund for $2 million a year over the next 15 years from the state of Ohio. And the governors looked at that and looked at the Browns proposal and said, yeah, okay, you guys want $600 million from the state of Ohio. It's not that I object to it. It's just, we don't have that kind of money in the general fund. Right. So that's where he came up with let's double the gaming tax for the gaming companies.
And you talked to the governor about that.
Right. Yeah. And have them pay for this to generate the funds. So now not only can the Browns ask for 40% of the project cost, which is so $2.4 billion. Let me do the math real quick. Because what's interesting, there are some avenues here, Andy, where the Browns can eliminate the county. Okay. Where you could take and the Browns could actually add 40% of the 2.4, I believe, is around $900 million. Okay. You could ask the state for $900 million instead of the $600 million for the dome. But hang on, they can also ask for 40% because one of these wrinkles that was put in this proposal for the slush fund is if you do a stadium development, a multi-use development around your stadium, you can apply for 40% of the cost of that project. So now the Browns, instead of financing the whole $1 billion for that, they could ask the state for $400 million toward the mixed use development. Take that $400 million extra and put it toward the dome. Okay.
Gotcha.
And now it's a shell game. You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah. So now, no, listen, you just picked up another $4. Yeah.
Now you lower Brook Park's obligation. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So there's a way for and that's why it's like, let's not, the Browns proposal they put out there with, them paying 1.2, the state paying 600, the county paying 178 million. And I think it was the 422 million for Brook Park, right?
Right.
Hold the phone on that whole pie chart that the Browns put together, because how this budget comes out of the House and the Senate and the State House and gets to the governor's office by the end of June, that could tell us what the path forward to fund this whole shebang is going to look like to begin with, right?
So yeah, and so what I'm saying is they could basically, so let's just say they got it down to like 15, that they could cover 85% of it. Is that how high do you think we're going there then?
I think
but right now you've said it was with the state money without the,
you could possibly cover 80 to 90% of the project cost.
Okay, so if they go to 90%, let's say they can go to 90% and then bring in investors for the last 10%. Okay. And I don't know that this is what we want because of ticket prices. I saw this happen in Columbus. If they go totally private and bring in another private with the state, does that make sense?
Yep.
And they could basically choke the city by doing that, couldn't they?
Well, you mean they could, I don't know, choke, but they could eliminate the need for county assistance.
And then at that point, well, if they could figure out a way to get rid of, so if they don't need the county assistance,
right,
and they bring it in, the city doesn't matter anyway at that point, right? Cleveland doesn't matter in this anyways if they're moving. So the day that their lease is up in 28, is that right?
So here's the thing. Legally, the Browns lease will expire February 1st, 2029.
Okay. All right. February 1st, 2029. Okay. So if the lease ends that day, what's the difference between that and renting an apartment?
I know, but
none. So I don't understand, what legs does the city of Cleveland have to stand on if the Browns can 100% do this without the county?
Well, and that's why they're fighting this in federal court under the Commerce Clause of the United States Constitution. Because you're right, it's what the city of Cleveland is basically saying, and the Browns put this in their filing this week. And there is no mechanism built into the lease that obligates the Browns to extend the lease in the current building. Okay. And there is no lease extension agreed to or signed off on either. Right. And so the Browns are basically saying, we will have fulfilled our legal obligations to return the building in a certain condition to the city of Cleveland upon the expiration of the lease. And that is that. We should be free to move into a new house if we so desire.
Right.
And the city of Cleveland is saying no, because we have spent close to $300 million in taxpayer money on that stadium. You are obligated to remain within the city limits because you're receiving that support. And then the Browns counter argue that and say, yeah, but once the lease is expired, there's zero taxpayer obligation going forward. So this is why the federal court needs to decide this. In my view, I'm not a lawyer, but that's just my take on it. I think the federal court is what has to decide it, because this is a state law, Andy. This isn't a city of Cleveland law. This is a state law. So it's got to be the federal court that decides this, not the county court, because what the county court's going to decide is, do the Cleveland Browns owe the city of Cleveland remedies and damages for leaving? And again, the Browns are arguing Art Modell broke a lease 3 years in advance to move a team to Baltimore, Maryland. We are fulfilling our existing lease in a taxpayer-supported stadium. We will have no obligations once we fulfill that lease, so we can move into a new home. And you should not, under the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, be allowed to prohibit us from doing that.
I get it. All right, I'm going to leave you with one last joke here that I think would be unbelievably funny. Wouldn't it be hysterical if there was a way that Brook Parks could don't laugh. Well, do laugh, because I think it's kind of funny.
Okay.
If Brook Park could secede from Cuyahoga County
good Lord,
and get picked up by Lorain County or Summit County.
Stop.
And the good people of Brook Park vote to leave Cuyahoga County.
You know what?
Why couldn't they be annexed by another county?
Because there's no bordering area.
Border doesn't matter. Have you ever seen what the outline of Columbus looks like?
I know.
Have you ever seen the outline of Columbus into
Yes.
Pickerington County, into other counties? I just think
it's
funny.
also seen, what is it, the 46th parallel between the United States and Canada?
It's whatever it takes. Yeah.
Actually, believe
there's
it or not,
there's little inlets and
there is
stuff.
a town.
Yes, I've seen
There is a town, I think it's in Minnesota, that you have to go through Canada to get back to the United States because there's a lake there.
Yes. I love it.
But here's
all right. I'm done. I'm done playing geography.
I know.
What'd you say?
Real quick answer, to your question. There is a nuclear option in this whole thing.
Well, let's hear it. What is it?
Browns leave Cuyahoga County.
How far away?
And a neighboring
Texas?
county?
Texas?
No. I'm talking like Lorain, Summit, Medina, Portage, Lake. You know what I mean? Like if Cuyahoga County don't want to play ball, what if the Browns,
Why, if you were the Haslams, why would you want to play ball with the county right now? They've done everything. But I mean, if I'm Brook Park, I am super mad at Cuyahoga County.
The big concern of the Browns right now, and it's a very valid one, and this goes into what I was talking about, like the mistrust. And again, this was put in the court filing. That's where I'm getting it from.
Right.
They're concerned that the city is trying to run the clock out on them so that they're stuck.
So the last question, when are the courts going to do anything?
Don't know. The federal's been refiled, which I don't know how much that resets that clock, because that was originally filed in October and that case has gone nowhere and it's now mid-March. And then in January, that's when the city of Cleveland went to the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas to file their suit. Well, they're now just starting pre-trial phone calls starting in early April. I think April 8th or April 9th. That's the next thing on the docket. Mm-hmm. So these things are moving in a snail's pace. And that's why
it's not helping. It's not helping.
That's why I think it's imperative.
So what happens if the Browns want to break ground right now? Who's stopping them?
Well, the Brown. Well, first of all, they don't own the land yet. They're paying it off. Okay, they're making their payments.
Mhm.
They should own the land outright by the end of the year. And then their goal is to break ground this time next year in Brook Park, which gets the doors open in time for August of 2029.
And when do you know when all the transportation, all the federal highways, the highways out there, when do they start construction?
Well, again, we don't know. Like that $130 million we talked about for the Shoreway and the
Mhm.
downtown connector. Oh, I mean, they made those announcements under the previous administration last fall. And the the Trump administration, they're reviewing all the federal spending right now and all the federal dollars being allocated. And there's no guarantee that Cleveland's going to see a penny of that money that's been promised. So,
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about I'm talking about the airport restructuring of highways and stuff. That's all federal, isn't it?
you mean the Hopkins
Federal and
project?
state, yeah.
Yeah, well, so I think that's actually been scaled back a little bit
Mhm.
because originally it was supposed to be a $3 billion project.
Mhm.
And now the city of Cleveland is saying it's going to be a $2 billion project. So, and let's be honest about it, that's actually in pretty good shape out there. And that's what
Yeah, the only big issue is
the
westbound on 480 to get to the airport is still a little hairy.
yeah, and getting in and out of that airport, it gets really backed up at times,
Mhm.
in rush hour and things like that. The big thing, and what amongst the many reasons that the Browns love that Brook Park site, aside from having
Close to
480 and
Berea.
71 there and 237,
Mhm.
is the fact that the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, the road, the surface infrastructure, like it's gonna cost pennies on the dollar to modify that infrastructure for the dome and development as compared to the hundreds of millions of dollars the lakefront, whether that's Burke, whether that's the existing stadium, is ultimately going to cost. So I kind of feel like both proposals wash out from a dollars and cents standpoint.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is far from over. We're no further down the line than we were when we've been talking about this for the last couple months here.
Mhm.
But ultimately, they gotta get these legal issues settled, because I don't think that this war of words going back and forth between the
I'm
politics.
tired of it already. I don't want to hear it. Just
Yeah.
do your job. That's all. But everybody, just do your job. He's Daryl Ryder. I'm Andy Baskin. For Evan O'Brien, our amazing producer. It's always game day in Cleveland. We're back with the next episode probably next week.